evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and the guest this evening is Stacy Ames, candidate for City Council Ward 3. So, as a new candidate, who or what is a Stacy Ames?
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, George, and thank you to BevCam. And so I'm happy to introduce myself a bit. I live on Prospect Street with my 19-year-old son, Ben, who is a BHS grad and will be heading off to UMass Lowell in the fall. I've lived here for 27 years, but my family's been here for more than a century. Like many immigrants, my grandfather escaped really a dangerous tyranny in Russia and came here right to Beverly. His first job was at the SHU, the Cummings Center, and he worked really hard. He opened the first taxi business in the city, and he worked with his son. He had a gas station and tire business in where the Century Bank is. My uncle, then his son, went off into World War II and died in a POW camp after surviving the Bataan Death March.
Oh, wow.
And that corner, that square in Elliott and Rantoul is named after my uncle today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom went to Washington Beetle, and she was the first person in my family to go to college. And she really supported me and enabled me to go to Wheaton. Like her, I've always been interested in education, politics, and civic volunteering, public affairs. So I've never personally run for office, but currently I've been on the board of the Beverly Education Foundation for a while, and I'm also a corporator for the Beverly Bank, which is really a conduit from the bank into the community. Well, the bank has an upper board, board of directors, and then they have a wider board with 50 or 60 community members.
And local interest,
Local interest, really, to help the bank dive in and understand what's going on the ground.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And I've learned a lot, too, about how a bank runs and really how great Beverly Bank is in terms of supporting the community. And like my grandfather, I'm the CEO of a small manufacturing company over in Salem. Running that business has taught...
What do you make?
Oh, it's a sciencey business, George. We put layers of ceramic and metal onto machine parts for wear, electrical insulation, corrosion, things like that. So we had big customers like Raytheon and, big wire and cable companies. Done it forever.
Yeah.
So, but running that has taught me how to work with people and complete projects, work with budgets, create goals, and see them through to fruition.
And make real decisions.
Make real decisions, absolutely.
So what it gets down to, why are you running for city council then? You sound like you're pretty busy.
I am, but I'm running because I believe that Ward 3 is the heart of Beverly. I think that it's the most important ward. I believe
Why is it most important?
It's the economic engine for the city with the Cummings Center and all the commerce on Park, Rantoul, and Cabot. It's the education center with the high school, the middle school, and about a half dozen or more other schools there. But what it really is about for me is the people who live there. It's about us. And all of the things that happen within the community really have an impact on neighborhoods and on residents. And so I believe that we need a strong city councilor with their ear to the ground that understands what's going on with the businesses and the residents and the schools, can maintain that balance and make sure for those residents that they have a strong presence at City Hall. And so I've been talking to residents about just a multitude of issues.
What kind of issues do the residents bring up?
Housing.
What about
traffic?
Housing?
Housing is one of the two issues I hear the most.
What about housing? What are they concerned about?
They're concerned about costs. They're concerned if they're younger, they're afraid they can't live here and move in. If they're older, they feel like they can't leave their homes and downsize because they have nowhere to go. And I just have been reading through the planning department's housing report that they did based on, I think they finished it in 2016, but a lot of the data was from 2012 to 14. And it showed so many of the people, so many residents here are spending between 1/3, 1/2 or more of their monthly income on housing, which is just deemed not economically sustainable. And that was in 2016.
Yeah.
3 years later, the impacts are even bigger.
Well, you and I first met at the session they had over at the middle school on the grand plan for Beverly.
Yes, we
did.
did.
And they brought up some issues on housing. I think you sat in on that table
I did.
that had that discussion.
I did.
What's your impression from that? Do you think the city is heading in the right direction, or is it going to make a good move in this direction?
I think it's really complicated. I think it's not an issue that we just have here alone in Beverly. I think if you take a little bit bigger view, the White House and all the candidates running around in New Hampshire are starting to talk about housing because people in New Hampshire are in the same fate. I think it's more intense here because we live in this blessedly wonderful community with beaches, beautiful ocean, access to highway, incredible commerce and businesses. It's just a beautiful, wonderful place to live. So it's even more attractive than the average. So, but I really think if we can bring people together, we can solve it. I think we can make it better. I mean, if you look at what we've done with the cabinet.
Make it better, what is the it that you want to make better?
Number one, I would like to figure out how to make it possible for people who live here and want to live here to live here. And it's a balance. It's a balance of quality of life, of housing density, of this report said that we need new types of housing of all types in this community.
The chart they put up on the wall when we were at that seance a couple of weeks ago was saying we need something like 5,000 new
That's what they're saying.
Housing units.
And then what happens? What happens, how do we... And it's up and down the North Shore. It's just not Beverly. So where do they go? What do they look like? What kind of density can we afford? And how does it impact everything else that goes on here, from the traffic, the school system, and police and fire? I mean, all these things are important, and it's a balance. And I believe that Ward 3 is right smack in the middle of all of it.
Well, yeah, Ward 3's got Rantoul Street running through it. And
Cabot?
The discussion has been in the paper for quite some time of you're building another high-rise on Rantoul Street,
right,
and they're turning it into a canyon.
Right.
Recognize that there is a motive from at least the governor through Boston's mayor to provide housing for the people in Boston in those areas that are located close to the railroad tracks,
right,
or the train stations.
Right.
And Ward 3 has at least one train station in it, I think. And Montserrat's not, that's Ward 4.
That's 4.
But it's close to Ward 3.
Gloucester Crossing really isn't, but no. But I think that's not even necessarily the point. I think that there are a couple of things to think about. A, all the people who do want to live here, and the fact that we do need more housing across the board, not just one type. The other thing that I often think about, too, is that housing adjacent to train stations has been more dense forever.
Yeah.
It always has.
Yeah.
many of these buildings downtown, the high-rises, have had very little impact on the school system. I think there's something like 9 children that have been added to that.
Yeah.
Not to say that the school-age population isn't growing. It truly is. But I think that that's where the balance comes. It comes with, do we take and allow people to put in-law apartments on their property like they're discussing in Salem?
Yeah.
Had a great conversation about that with Paul Anzikos. How do we feel about these large buildings? I think it's understanding. There's certainly a lot of upset about it.
Well, one of the things that kind of disappointed me was when we started the discussion at that meeting a while back over building denser dwellings around the railroad stations.
Right.
Then the next phrase is, well, we want to maintain the character of the environment around the stations and the neighborhood. Those get to be conflicting things.
Yes, they do.
And the solution that somebody bantered out was, well, we can take these large buildings and subdivide them into condos. You're still not going to get the density that you're looking for around that area.
Exactly.
So there's going to be a pulling and tugging between different areas in town.
There absolutely will.
Ward 3 has already got more than its share of high-rises.
It does.
And one of the things that bothers me about that approach is that's all well and good, but when you want to go get the groceries, you can't get them there. You got to get in your car and drive to the Cummings Center across the street from that, or out to North Beverly, something like that. So I think there's an issue that needs to be thought out a little deeper than what we're talking about.
Absolutely, and I agree. But I do believe, if you look at traditionally what this community has done, number one, thank goodness, we live in a country where don't tell me what to do with my property, right? So it's not, it's not Big Brother saying you have to do this or that.
Well, you're lucky you don't live in Ward 5.
Capitalism is live and well in Beverly. So that's number one. But
let me get in my punchline.
You go.
That if you don't live in Ward 5, where it's not in my backyard, it's not even on your front lawn. That one still bugs me that they had that free-for-all. But
but I just think, I look at what the leaders and the people in this city did with the Cabot. I look at 20 years ago, we had so many empty shops, and stores in downtown. And I really believe that government can take you so far. But I think if we decide that we love the city, and let me tell you, door to door, street to street, we do, that we need to come together to figure out who we want to become. So I was really happy to see that housing plan, but I think there needs to be more of it, to really come to be forward thinking and saying this is where we're going to go.
Unfortunately, you're almost pushing on one of my hot buttons, but anyway, but this is your show, not mine.
I beg to differ.
But the thing that bothers me is we talk about a vibrant community, which means a lot of service industry in the downtown area. And where do those people live?
Yes.
And that kind of housing is not around. It's this range of housing that we're talking about.
It is.
That, it's nice to talk about it, but all we're building is high-rise condos or apartments for the expatriates from Boston.
I hear you.
So now we're getting into the issue about what do we have to do with zoning to make it possible to build reasonably affordable.
Yes.
And that's really affordable. There's two kinds of affordable. That's
right.
There's the stuff that meets the 40B limits, and then there's what you really can afford. And you made the point earlier that too many people are spending more than 30%.
Yes, they are.
30% is sort of an accepted standard. Once you get over 30%,
and there are many people closer to 50.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got Harbor Light. You do have, there are some of these partnerships that exist. And I believe that's really, when I go to door, that's where I hear the groundswell. That's exactly where I think there's common ground. I mean, and it's not just from there. I talked to Mike Wheeler from the bank, and he says, Stacy, I pay somebody $70,000 a year. They can't afford to live here.
Yeah.
Paul Lanzicos talking about seniors. The same exact thing. So it's one, and Ward 3 is a ward where working, just like my family who started in Ward 3, I mean, it's where working class people live.
Yeah.
And so that would be a major focus for me. And that's why I have been sitting down with Andrew as well, just to try to understand what's possible.
Yeah.
But I have to be just a little bullish to think that there are solutions that are possible. We can't solve everything. No. That's for sure. But
we can do a better job than what we're doing. Yeah.
I think it would be a worthwhile effort to put energy there, for sure. For sure.
Okay, besides housing, what else do you think driving you to run?
Well, one of the other things that drives me to run is that is communication. Just communication. I would like to see people who live in Ward 3 understand more about what's going on at City Hall, whether it's the council or anything else that's going on at City Hall. Because I feel, even when we talk about housing, I feel like there are times when people just don't feel like they always know what's coming down the line. And I think that is important, that as decisions are made, people feel empowered and part of them.
I think what you're alluding to is people get surprised that, where did this happen? I never heard about that.
I personally believe that when major items come up before the council, that there ought to be a 2-week period or figure out a period for those councilors to dig into those issues, to talk to the people in their ward so they can do more homework, and they can also include the public, citizens, voters, people who live here, in terms of what's going on, what's coming forth, and to have that conversation so there is more buy-in in how this city is run.
One of the charts that surprised me at that meeting on the plan, the master plan, was that as a percentage of the budget, the money we get from the state is a lower and lower percentage.
It is.
Then when I went out and checked with Jerry Paracella, he's claiming that, we get more money every year.
Wow.
So now I'm starting to get confused as to why is it that as a percent of our budget, the state contribution is less and less. So this is another one of these issues that I think the city council...
Understanding the process and the openness and the transfer of information, I think is vital. And in fact, I'm going to sit down with Mr. Ailes in a couple of weeks, hopefully, and talk to him about the budget, because I want to understand. I think to be a good counselor, the information won't come to me. I need to seek it out.
Yeah.
I don't assume that, I can just know this by reading. I need to go and meet and sit, create relationships, not just with City Hall, but with people who live all over this ward.
Well, it's part of the issue comes down to, and again, I keep harping back to this meeting because this is the latest thing that's been happening in town.
I know.
There was a meeting, went on for a couple hours, lots of charts, lots of discussion. Nothing in the paper about it.
You're right.
So there was no reporter covering it. We're in a situation now where as you're pointing out, if you want to find out about something, you can't go just dial up, the Beverly Patch or Salem News and say, what happened at that meeting?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's getting to be another issue of how do you as a city councilor get the word out to your constituents? Hey, this is what's happening. This is what's coming.
I've got to say that I think Estelle Rand has done a dynamite job working with the Ward 2 Civic Association. And I think she's created this group of people that's been able to really disseminate information. They've been empowered. They talk about the issues that concern them. And I think they also make an impact.
Yeah.
Because if you're not making an impact, there's no great joy in just sitting by and looking on, right? You want to make an impact. And there is a great group of young families in Ward 3 that are starting up a civic association. And I would be so supportive of them and anyone else who wanted to work in that way. And I would definitely try to find whether it's a newsletter or ways to communicate with people, because this is a really diverse ward, and there's a ton that goes on that impacts micro neighborhoods in very different ways.
Yeah, to that point, there is a blog for Prospect Hill,
right,
which is where I live.
Me too.
And pretty soon you look at that thing, and there's people from Salem commenting on it. So I see that as there is one outlet, one voice,
right,
for too big an area.
Right.
And yeah, it's nice to find out how you get your windows washed in Salem, but that doesn't work for me.
No.
So I think this is an area that each one of the wards, perhaps,
that's a dynamite idea,
needs to have its own blog.
Exactly.
Of hey, what's going on in our area?
That's right.
Because you also get into some issues, too, that are universal.
Yes, they are.
The rat problem is all over the place.
That's right. All the construction, I think, makes it worse.
That aggravates it. And what we're finding out is you feed the birds, and next thing you know, the rats and the squirrels are down there catching what drops out.
That's right.
So I think this kind of information needs to be disseminated. I hate to use that word,
and I think it also helps the city function when they understand what homeowners and residents, apartment dwellers are all facing. Yeah. I think that is a really important, it's an important piece of it. The other thing the other issue that is really important that I've heard everywhere is traffic. And it's different traffic, right? I mean, the people who live on, say, Judson, adjacent to Rantoul, have different issues than the ones who live up by Flair.
Yeah.
I spoke with a resident who's a grandmother, and she said, my kids used to play on the street. I can't let them anymore because the food delivery and the alcohol delivery trucks and the delivery trucks just go racing down here trying to avoid Rantoul, and I'm afraid to let my kids out.
Yeah.
And 1A and the middle school, those impacts of traffic are just as, they're different, but they're just as important. Yeah, they really are.
Every one of the schools has got a traffic problem at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
I know. I see. Are you on one of the boards that
parking
for the
and traffic?
Parking and traffic.
Yeah. So
did they do a study for the middle school by any chance before that was built?
There were they did 2 studies as part of the contract.
And
this is what we've got. Yeah, the Parking and Traffic Commission was not involved. It was all done as part of the development architecture's plan for the middle school.
And have you ever seen those? Do you know what thought the impacts were going to be? Oh, just curious.
Well, I was on the commission for it, and they flashed in front of us one night. But you know how some of these things go. Here's another chart. Here's another chart. I mean, something of that stuff, you have to sit down and study it kind
Oh,
of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
that's my point. You got to dig in.
So we're now to the end of the show, and I've been getting this wild signal from the floor manager that it's your turn.
Okay.
What do you want the people to remember about you?
Sure. Well, first, I want to thank you, George, for this opportunity and all the great people here at BevCamp. And I just want to say that I believe that Ward 3 is the heart of Beverly, where neighborhoods, businesses, and schools all come together to form the most important ward in the city. What happens in Ward 3 matters, and it matters to me, and it matters to our future as a city. I'm running for city council because I want Ward 3's concerns to be heard loud and clear at City Hall. I would welcome the opportunity to use my experience in business, in education, and in my civic involvement to support every resident in Ward 3. You can count on me to listen and to respond to your concerns, whether it be a curb cut or traffic, a senior concern, or housing, or a school concern, or anything else that's important to us. I'm all about Ward 3 and trying to get things done. And you can count on me to be a strong advocate for Ward 3 through the mayor's planning process and to support the Ward 3 Civic Association. I've been going door to door, street to street since May. I've met so many wonderful Ward 3 residents, and they all want, and they deserve, to have a strong voice on the council. I hope that you will give me your vote and the chance to be a new and determined councilor focusing on what matters to us in Ward 3. Thank you.
Well, I think as we wrap this thing up, I need to point out that you're the third candidate for Ward 3 that we've had on the show. And the reason that we had three of them on is that there's going to be a primary.
September 24th, George.
So I want to make sure that everybody that recognizes that there is one primary in the city.
Yes, there is.
It is going to be Ward 3 in September 24th. So people in Ward 3 plan on being there because that's your first shot at it.
It really is, and your vote will count.
Yeah. And since we're down to the last minute, it's time to thank everybody for watching this evening. We're trying to get the other two candidates on so we get all five of you. And we will thank you very much for joining us this evening. See you next time.